My name is Christian Ashley, a seminary student and servant of God, and you are listening to the Let Nothing Move You podcast, a proud Anazal Ministries podcast. Welcome back, everyone, to the next episode of the Let Nothing Move You podcast. I'm your host, Christian Ashley, as we continue on through the book of Deuteronomy. Today, we're going to be in Deuteronomy 24 through 26. Now, a bit of an update. As you're listening to this, I preached yesterday, like I mentioned before, at Macedonia Baptist Church, and I had a great time. It was a very rewarding experience. I decided on Isaiah 42. Next week, I'll be doing 43, so I'll be back there next week. Got a lot of good feedback. For what's going on there as they're in a transition period, a pretty good crowd. It was really, really rewarding. And, it just kind of, those moments when you feel, oh yeah, I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. That's what I was feeling around there. So I'm very encouraged by it. Even in the middle of not knowing where I'm going to be or what kind of job I'm going to have or which church it is. You know what? Right now, I'm content and I enjoy that. But because I was focusing more on that than anything else, I did not do all of my research for this week, which you know what that means. No notes. So we're just going to do it on the fly again, just so you guys can get this episode on time. I haven't missed a week yet, and I don't plan on doing it now. So here we go. We'll be starting in chapter 24, verses 1 through 4. When a man takes a wife and marries her, if then she finds no favor in his eyes because he has found some indecency in her, and he writes her a certificate of divorce and puts it in her hand and sends her out of his house, and she departs out of his house, and if she goes and becomes another man's wife, and the latter man hates her and writes her a certificate of divorce and puts it in her hand and sends her out of his house, or if the latter man dies who took her to be his wife, then her former husband who sent her away may not take her again to be his wife after she has been defiled, for that is an abomination before the Lord. You shall not bring sin upon the land that the Lord your God is giving you for an inheritance. So first off there, see, abominations can happen with heterosexual couples too. Anytime sex is used incorrectly, God sees it as an abomination. So if anyone tells you, you focus on the wrong things, you only focus on this, well, God didn't just focus on that. He focused on all the abominable things. So take that. Now, in regards to what's actually happening here, there's a lot. And you remember conversations we've had before. This is what I'm referring to, that Jesus refers back to later on in the Gospels when he's talking to the Pharisees when they're asking about divorce. And Jesus saying, God allowed Moses to write this into the law for you to divorce your wife because you people are hard of heart. And this man at the very beginning is not a good man. He has found something indecent in her, and that can be interpreted multiple ways. The idea being is that he more than likely is not the one in the right, because we know what would happen to this wife. It was the result of something that she had done, i.e. having sex with another man. She would have been stoned to death, and the guy who had been with her. But this is something separate. This is a man. It's like, oh, you're not as pretty as you used to be. Oh, you've gained some weight. Oh, I've just grown tired of you. And you know what? I think I want a younger, hotter wife, so I'm going to get rid of you. And this poor woman being sent that way, away from the home, is now free to get remarried. And if that husband does the same thing to her, she's free to leave too through this. And then the guy who divorced her first isn't allowed to remarry her. Why? Maybe he's had a change of heart. No, because if you'll recall, there is a bride price to be paid, a dowry. And now, especially if her former husband, the second husband, has died, guess who has the dowry, and guess who starts looking a little more desirable to the guy who got rid of her in the first place? So this is not some guy who's like, oh, I made a mistake, I screwed up, I sinned. This is a guy taking advantage of a woman who is now richer as a result of her husband dying, and then taking that wealth for himself. So God, through the law, is saying, I will allow this, even though I find it abhorrent and evil. But you can't take advantage of this, and you can't take advantage of that poor woman who you've already disgraced. So don't do it again. And the divorce is one of those things that's just a part of our unnatural world, a world that never should have been the way that it is, and yet that's the one that we live in. And God intended marriage to just be between that man and woman for all of their lives as long as they live. And if a husband dies, if a wife dies, then they're free to remarry or they're free not to marry. But God despises divorce. He despises it because it is unnatural. It is human to desire to not stick it out with a marriage. Now, there are ways, even through God's ways later on, for someone to get a divorce, and it being just to do so. One, of course, being sexual immorality. God extending more mercy, says, instead of that person being stoned to death, well, now you can divorce them and you have no guilt from that because they have cheated and therefore have proven themselves unworthy of the marriage. In the same way, it applies to abuse. And one who has cheated their wife unfairly has, in a sense, been immoral with her sexually because the woman doesn't really have the power to say no to any sex that comes from that. Ergo, that husband is not practicing the way you're supposed to have sex in marriage. So he is abusing his wife sexually in an immoral fashion. Ergo, she can leave. The same thing through physical abuse. Same thing through negligence. There is a way for divorce to be done and it to be righteous. But ultimately, most divorces that happen, especially among Christian couples, are the result of financial issues, falling out of love with each other, or being forced into a marriage because people had sex and then a kid came from that. And now, because of the repercussions of their actions, they had to get married as people were doing things back in the day because they would have seen the woman as sullied, but not the man because, double standards are a thing. And it's a broken thing that the world looks at Christian marriage as a joke because some of it is. And it's Christians' fault. Christians as a whole, some Christians who have done these things is how I should word this, that the world looks at Christian marriage as a joke when it should be a shining example of what Christ has done for the church as our husband of the church, as we are his brides. The church is his bride in the sense that we are taken care of by him. We are looked after by him. He is the head of the house. Like a husband is supposed to be to his wife, to love her, to dote on her, to cheer her on, to be enthusiastic for her, to take care of her. But the world doesn't see that because I remember last thing I looked it up, it was about like 50% of Christian marriages end up in divorce. It's been a while since I've read that report. It may have changed. Hopefully it's gone down, but there's that cynical part of me that doesn't believe that. So you look at this right here and you go, oh, those silly people back in the days of the Israelites, they just got divorced wrong. They got marriage wrong. No, we're just as bad in different ways in how we view marriage. And I say this as someone who's never gotten married. It's something that I would like to do one day, find a right woman, start a family together. But you know what? That hasn't happened. So if I have an improper view of marriage before I get into that, I could end up being part of the problem. And that's something we have to learn as we're going through this walk, is to have a proper view of marriage, that it's supposed to be a holy sacrament of wife and husband working in unison together for each other's benefit to lead the other further and closer to Christ. And if I look at it as like, well, I'm just going to get what I want, or she looks as I'm just getting what I want, then it's not a holy marriage. It's a marriage based on our ideas and our conveniences instead of what he desires from it. So I challenge everyone listening right now, are you treating your spouse as well? Are you showing them love? Are you submitting to them when you need to submit? Are you talking when you need to talk? Are you leading as you're supposed to be leading? Because when we don't do these things, that's when strife gets even worse, because strife is going to happen regardless of how well a marriage is going. But it gets a lot worse when there's already chinks in the armor. And by the time you get hit with that barrage of whatever has happened being thrown your way, your armor just explodes and you're not able to protect yourselves because you weren't doing the work to make sure the armor was actually going to do its job when something bad happened. So just take that in mind and think things through about, okay, what are we supposed to do now? How am I to love my wife well? How am I to love my husband well? How am I to avoid the things that are happening here and bring glory to God through marriage, through this dating relationship that I'm in, what have you? And we'll move from there to verses 5 through 6. When a man is newly married, he shall not go out with the army or be liable for any other public duty. He shall be free at home 1 year to be happy with his wife, whom he has taken. No one shall take a mill or an upper millstone in pledge, for that would be taking a life in pledge. So two separate things, I lumped them together for the sake of all these miscellaneous things happening. The first part, we talked about it a little before. God puts a very practical thing in the law that serves no other purpose but to allow couples who have just gotten married to enjoy each other. You know what? Because you're supposed to do that. But if a war happens, or if a man is elected to some public office in this regard, there's supposed to be time that we're supposed to be away from those things, and they're not supposed to be the number one thing that matters. The number one thing that's supposed to matter is the new wife, is the new husband, the two of them working together to figure out who each other is now that they have been married together. Hopefully they knew each other beforehand back then, but now with the dating scene, you would think there would have been enough time for them to get to know each other better, but you don't know how you're supposed to live together until you get married. At least you're not supposed to until you get married. This is God's way of saying, for all the good that you did, for doing what you were supposed to do, from abstaining from sin, now you get to enjoy the fruits of marriage, that thing I gave you and blessed you with. So just celebrate and have fun together. Learn who each other is. Work together, solve problems, listen to the things that you can't solve, have fun, and work it out. And then when that year is up, go and do work, because you've done enough work here to show that she is your priority, that he is your priority. And then you can go to work and make sure that work doesn't become number one. When it should go, God, family, work. I'm sure there are other things I could add to that, but for sake of simplicity, those three will do. So do it well. That's put in the law. That serves no purpose from a human perspective outside of the fact that God loves men and women and wants them to enjoy marriage and to enjoy each other and learn about each other. And in verse 6, the idea of being done here is if you take a mill or an upper millstone and a pledge, say like someone is loan, you need a loan, and you say, well, give me your upper millstone. Well, effectively what you've done in a culture like Israel, which is very farm-based, agricultural-based, is murdered that person by proxy. Because now they can't grind their grain. So now they can't even feed themselves because you asked for something that was to take something away from them that now they can't even take care of themselves, nor will they be able to pay you back. So it's a very unpragmatic thing to do, a very evil and petty and selfish thing to do, to take away that millstone. Because now you're doing it for the sake of power rather than loving the other person and saying, okay, yeah, you owe me a debt. So why don't I take this instead as collateral? And then when you pay me back, I'll give it back to you. You can't take a millstone away because you've murdered them. And now there's no way for them to pay you back unless you're intending to take what they have when they're dead, which shows an evil heart, which shows a greedy heart. And God denies that person that right through the law to protect the poor from unjust loans, and that extent, unjust seizures. Now, next up, we have verses 7 through 9. If a man is found stealing one of his brothers of the people of Israel, and if he treats him as a slave or sells him, then that thief shall die. So you shall purge the evil from your midst. Take care, in a case of leprous disease, to be very careful to do according to all that the Levitical priest shall direct you. As I commanded them, so you shall be careful to do. Remember what the Lord your God did to Miriam on the way as you came out of Egypt. So the first part here, oh, that wicked God, he just loves slavery. He loves adding it to his scriptures and making it lawful and good. Oh, wait, no. If you actually read the text, you'll find out that God despises slavery. And yes, sure, this verse specifically is just for Israelites. But do you really think that if they can not do this to the Israelites, they can do this to a foreigner? To unjustly steal someone, to take them away and force them to be a slave? No. Kidnapping is evil regardless of who it is being done to. And treating them as a slave is even worse because this does not fall under how it was to be done under the law, which, by the way, we're no longer under. So even if someone tried to prop it back up and say, well, the Bible says we can do it, it doesn't apply to us because that was a civil law for Israel. We are not the land of Israel as it was in this time in history. We have a higher law, the moral law to look up to, the one that says to love your neighbor as yourself. And I don't want to be a slave. I don't want to serve someone without being taken care of, without being paid for what I do. So I refuse to be one, and I refuse to take one. It's simple logic that people just make too complicated for their own good because they want to have something against Scripture. They want to say this is evil, and they're right to say slavery is evil, but then they try and say the Bible is evil because it encourages it, because they don't love Jesus. They don't love Scripture, and if they can find any way out of not serving God, they'll do it, even if it completely and utterly fails logic, because it is illogical in the first place for them to disregard God and not listen to what he says. So they would rather remain in their illogical mindset than look at the truth of what God says about what is to be done to someone who enacts human trafficking upon another person. It's madness. But the world is mad because the world wants its way. And they will deny God at every step of the way just to get what they desire. And the next part here, if you'll recall our time in Leviticus, the people of Israel were told exactly what to do to someone who has a leprous disease, and the different forms that came across in those chapters we discussed, some of which Karai and I did together way back when. Be smart was what God is saying here. He's not repeating everything he said before because he doesn't have to. He said, refer back to earlier, listen to your priests who know the law better than you, and do what they say. In other words, hey, when your doctor tells you something to do, they know better than you, unless they're not doing their job, and there are doctors out there who don't do their job, don't get me wrong, that don't take patients as seriously as they should. Yeah, those exist. I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about the actual doctor that is doing his job, doing her job to take care of you, and then you say, I don't feel like it. And I am bad about this because I keep forgetting to take my medicine some days. It just happens. I wish I could say it was willful evil, but I don't take care of myself as much as I should, even though I have it set up to where I should see it. But sometimes I walk right past my medicine, even though it is plain view. It is yellow-orange coloration with white pills in it, and it is backdropped by something to where I should obviously see it, and yet I walk past it because I forget to take care of myself. That is me not acting well for me. But when a doctor tells me take these pills, and I'm actually doing what I'm supposed to do, you know what I do? I take the pills because he, my doctor, knows better than I. So listen to what they say. Listen to the priests who know about Scripture better than you, who are doing the job, the pastors who are doing their job, watching over their flocks, who know more about Scripture. I'm not saying they're perfect people. I'm not saying they're not flawed. I am saying that they are smarter in spiritual matters than most of us listening right now. So listen to them. Be subservient in that sense of falling into submission. Now, if you have a question, ask. If you don't understand, ask. If you've got an argument to have, ask in private. Don't do it in front of everyone. Go to them and say, hey, here's what I think, and listen. And you may even be right, and the pastor may be wrong. But just listen well. Remember what happens to people who don't listen, as God points out, was what happened to Miriam, who knew better, by the way, and was a very spiritual and pious woman until she let pride and fear and greed take control of her heart. and have her act in a way against her brother that made her have leprosy. So don't end up like her. That's why God points back to that and says, listen, do the job. Don't hurt yourself. Be good. Just submit to those who do legitimately know better, because they should be looking out for you. If they don't, there's a problem. That's its own separate issue. There's something that needs to be done. Something's got to give. But if they're doing their job, just submit to them. 10 through 15. When you make your neighbor a loan of any sort, you shall not go into his house to collect his pledge. You shall stand outside, and the man to whom you make the loan shall bring the pledge out to you. And if he is a poor man, you shall not sleep in his pledge. You shall restore to him the pledge as the sun sets, that he may sleep in his cloak and bless you. And it shall be righteousness for you before the Lord your God. You shall not oppress a hired worker who is poor and needy, whether he is one of your brothers or one of the sojourners who are in your land within your towns. You shall give him his wages on the same day before the sun sets, for he is poor and counts on it, lest he cry against you to the Lord and you be guilty of sin. You ever heard someone say God hates poor people? God hates the homeless, or the unhoused, which is such a terrible way. It's the same thing. No, God doesn't hate either person. God doesn't only love the rich and hate the poor. He doesn't only love the poor and hate the rich. God loves both, and he expects both of them to submit to his authority alone. So the person who has made a loan and is now poorer for it, treat him well, so you're not taking advantage of him. Don't take his cloak away. Why? Because he's going to need the cloak, especially if he is homeless, to protect himself at night. Because it's going to get cold, even in Israel. So if you take that cloak away from him, you're submitting him to death, all for the sake of getting what you want, all for the sake of pride and greed. And God says no to that. No to that evil heart that would dare despise the poor man and dare put him in a situation where he will die because of your actions. It's murder by proxy, and God refuses to let his people enact that. Yeah, sure, the guy needs to pay back his loan that he took out, but this is not how you treat him. Love him well so that he can, because especially if he dies, how is he supposed to pay you back? Like, there's a shrewdness that even an evil man would look into this and go, oh, well, it doesn't make sense for me to do that. So how would you would have to be stupid evil, if we're in our alignment charts here, stupid evil to take someone's cloak knowing they're going to die in the middle of the night because of exposure, and you never get what you wanted from them because they can't pay you back because they're dead. And yet people do that. And even worse, as God points out in the other verses, other people don't get paid when they should, and they don't need to live that way. They can't live that way, because if you're not giving them their wages for that day, and most of the time people were paid daily for what they had done, then he's going to suffer. He's not going to be able to feed his family. He's not going to be able to feed it and clothe himself. He may lose a house. He may lose what possessions he has. And now you've got a worker who is going to be in worse shape than before, simply because you got greedy, when you could just treat him like a human being and give him what he needs. Or you could be a better boss and see his need and go, maybe I should pay him a little extra so that he doesn't suffer, so that he can feed his family, so that he can look after everything that he has. And instead, we look at our modern world now, and I mean, you guys know me. I'm not anti-capitalist. I'm not communist. I'm not an ultra-conservative. I'm not an ultra-capitalist. I would like to think that I'm a realist in this regard. And I look at the world and I see how people have allowed aspects of capitalism to go and just run amok when they shouldn't. And greed has become everything it's not supposed to in this world. And there are men and women out there who are worth millions and billions of dollars who are making that off the labor of millions of other people who they couldn't care one bit about. And yet while they're living in luxury, these people are at best being paid minimum wage or a little bit above that. And unfortunately, minimum wage hasn't increased like it should have, even though inflation has increased dramatically since the last time we increased what minimum wage is. So people just can't afford things anymore. They're forced to live in squalor. They're forced to live with people that they don't like simply because it's easier on them money-wise if they have 3 or 4 other people in the apartment paying rent, even though everyone despises each other there, and it causes further conflicts. So God decries this. God pushes this against evil people who would utilize this and says, no, my people are to have no part of this. You will pay your workers and you will pay them on time because I am the Lord. And when he cries out to me, who is going to avenge him? It's going to be me, God, avenging this person, this poor person who you didn't pay. And we look later on to the prophets and remember verses like these, because God is going to bring up multiple times over, you are not taking care of the poor. You are not paying them what they are owed. And you laugh at them, you despise them, you mock them. So judgment is coming to you, O Israel, O Judah, for what you've done, when all you had to do was not be greedy and just give them what they're owed. And by the way, give me, God, what I am owed, which guarantees you, if you're all working together, which is part of that conditional covenant, so it is in your best interest not to get greedy, your best interest to just do what I told you to do as I take care of you, like I promised I would. And yet that wasn't good enough for them. And they got exactly what they deserved. And some of the people right now who are living in luxury on the backs of people who are paid way less than them, some of them will live the rest of their lives out and they'll be fine in this world and they'll suffer no real harm because they're able to buy off courts or they're able to have people killed who might whistleblow. But guess where they're not going to be able to hide from? The judgment throne of God, who's going to remember every poor person, every abused person who cried out against them. And he's going to say, depart from me, you who practice lawlessness. This isn't my kingdom isn't yours. Go with your father, Satan. And they're going to get exactly what they deserve. We don't have to enjoy that, and I hope you don't. But we do get to see justice done in the end. When all they had to do was not act this way and just submit to him. Next up, verse 16. Fathers shall not be put to death because of their children, nor shall children be put to death because of their fathers. Each one shall be put to death for his own sin. Now, I know what some of you are thinking out there. So, well, God does exactly this multiple times in Scripture. He allows all the Gibeonites to get vengeance against Saul's family later on because of what he did to him, and all Saul's sons die. And it wasn't all of Saul's sons, and we'll get to that in a moment. Or Achan's family, after he steals from Ai, it should be the city before Ai, where they were supposed to destroy everything totally, and yet he kept it hidden. And then Korah and his rebellion, every part of his family was killed too by God. It's like God punishes them, and God contradicted himself. Like, no, he hasn't. Take everything in context here. Fathers shall not be put to death because of their children, nor shall children be put to death because of their fathers. Each one shall be put to death for his own sin. Korah's family had multiple opportunities to get out of his camp and rejoin Israel. Achan's family had multiple opportunities as they're drawing lots to know that something had been stolen, something had been taken that wasn't supposed to be theirs and was in their camp at that very moment. And as it went down from which tribe is it? Which part of the tribe? Which family? Which person? They had multiple opportunities to step up and say, he stole it. We are guilty of that. We shouldn't have done it. God forgive us. But they didn't. And they took what was their sin, and now they took their punishment with that sin. Same thing with Korah's family. We go to the sons of Saul being killed because of what Saul did to the Gibeonites. Whatever that is, it's not focused on too much. Well, guess who were probably co-conspirators, number one. And number two, did God tell David that's what he wanted him to do, go look at those verses and see, oh, God never told David to met out the punishment that he did. The Gibeonites, as Canaanite people, demanded those sons as sacrifices, and David gives in to their demands, which I would argue immensely is not following God's law. Because unless they were actively involved, which would mean they were culpable for what they are being put to death for, which is likely, but not really focused on too much in the text, they didn't deserve that. Now, if they did, yeah, they deserve it because they were culpable. But you never see God say, all right, David, this is exactly what I want you to do. That's David taking the law into his own hands, unless they were actually co-conspirators with their father Saul. So God does not put people to death because of the sins of their father. He puts them to death because of their own sin. He spells it out black and white right there. I could read the original Hebrew, but I didn't look it up, and I don't want to say it because that is a beautiful language that I will mangle. Each one shall be put to death for his own sin. Not your sin, not my dad's sin, my grandfather's sin, my sin. That's how he treats every person in this world, unless Jesus' sacrifice is covering them because they repented, because they fell down on their knees and said, I am not good enough and I never will be. Only you, God, are good enough. Forgive me for my sins. I have screwed up. I am in the wrong. You are perfect and holy and righteous. Protect me from what I rightfully deserve. And then that verse doesn't apply to any of us anymore who are his. We're still going to die because we're mortal, but we're not going to be put to death by God for our sin. And eternity awaits. And it's the good one. So never let anyone tell you that God's contradictory here, that God despises his own law, because it's just not in the book. And all it takes, as Christ says multiple times over there in 4:6, just read. Well, how does he? Just read the book. He probably says something better, and I'm just getting it off cuff like this. It's like all you have to do is read. Yeah, all you have to do is read. And if you read everything in context and don't pluck things out from where they're not supposed to be, and make your own hypotheses and theses out here that have nothing to do with the text, then you're not going to be in the wrong. All you got to do is read. And we're going to continue reading by going from 17 to 22. You should not pervert the justice due to the sojourner or the fatherless, or take a widow's garment in pledge. But you shall remember that you were a slave in Egypt, and the Lord your God redeemed you from there. Therefore I command you to do this. When you reap your harvest in your field and forget a sheaf in the field, you shall not go back to get it. It shall be for the sojourner, the fatherless, and the widow, that the Lord your God may bless you in all the work of your hands. When you beat your olive trees, you shall not go over them again. It shall be for the sojourner, the fatherless, and the widow. When you gather the grapes of your vineyard, you shall not strip it afterward. It shall be for the sojourner, the fatherless, and the widow. You shall remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt. Therefore, I command you to do this. First part, shall not pervert the justice due to the sojourner or to the fatherless, or take a widow's garment in pledge. Just because someone is poor, just because someone is foreign, does not mean they lose rights before the holy and mighty God. They are to be treated with respect. Yeah, do rules which have been broken need to be punished? Absolutely. When they break these rules, maybe they get sent back to where they came from. Or maybe they get placed in jail because rules were broken. Yes. But that does not mean you treat them cruelly. That does not mean, went a little southern there. That does not mean you treat them unjustly. It does not mean that you supersede the law of the land to put them where they're not supposed to be, rather than where they came from, so that they can be treated poorly by others. It means you love them well, and you punish those who break the law, and then you take care of those who have no one to defend themselves. It's super simple. Why does God demand this from Israel? because they were slaves in Egypt. And even when they were being tortured by them, they were still being taken care of by the Egyptians ultimately. Now, obviously, God was above all that, but Egypt still took care of them while they were sojourners in the land. So you are to be even better than them. You're to put them to shame. They made you slaves. They took away some of your food. They made you work even harder than before. You want to act that way. And us now, we are to do the same. We weren't slaves in Egypt, but we were slaves to our own sin, every last one of us. And if we want people not to live as slaves to their sin, we don't act as if we're still sinful. We fight for the oppressed. We fight for those who need God. Why? Because he did the same for us. And someone else in our lives loved us enough to do the same for us. We didn't just end up becoming Christians out of a vacuum. I didn't wake up one day and say, you know what? With no other context, I think I'm going to be a Christian. No, I had my parents working in my life. I had pastors pouring in my life, small group leaders, children's leaders pouring into my life to make sure I understood I'm not good enough and I need to make a change. There's no such thing as a self-made Christian. Even if somehow you ended up on a desert island somewhere, you had never talked to another person, and you somehow learned to speak English, and all you had was a Bible in front of you, someone had to put that Bible together, acting faithfully. Not just the original authors, but whoever, Zondervan, whatever, who's publishing it, someone faithful was working there for you. So quit acting like you're so important. Quit acting like you're above the law. Quit acting like you're above submitting yourself and being humble. Remember where we came from, and remember who saved us, and remember who God put in our lives to help bring us to where we are today, and praise his name for what he's done, because he looks out for those that no one else does. Which, once again, if you look at verses like this and the ones that come after, who are all the people that the prophets are decrying? People who don't take verses like these seriously. So if that is important to God then, it is important to God now. And anyone who acts against the word of God is never in the right. So quit looking at them as parasites. Quit looking at people in these specific categories here as, well, someone in their family must have sinned, so they got exactly what they deserve. Even if that were true, they're still human beings created in the image of God, and we are commanded by his moral law to look after them and love them. And specifically for Israel, in the last part of these verses here, they were not to get greedy with everything that was on their land. Yes, it was theirs, but some of that was given to them by God for the purpose of them not using it for themselves. You're not supposed to take every sheaf. You're not supposed to take every olive. You're not supposed to take all the grapes or the grain or what have you. Leave it if it falls. Why? Because people who don't have money, who don't have land of their own, who have nothing except what falls down as scraps, they need it more than you. Because I allowed that to fall for their sake. Because I love them, and I want you to love them as much as I love them. So don't double back. Don't pick things up off the ground. Leave it for them so that they can eat and be happy and not have to worry about what next. Or even better, you could be giving it to them so they don't even need to do this. Look after them. That's why I grow very suspicious of any church that does not actively have a program devoted to the needs of the people around them, whether that be canned foods or blankets or socks, clothing, something. If you're not doing at least one of those things as a church, I would be very upset if I were you, because that tells me that's not a priority for that church. Or that tells me maybe it was at one point in time, but someone left and no one rose up to do the job. Maybe that's you. Maybe you need to pray and find out it's not you and someone else. You need to encourage them to do it. But if a church isn't taking care of those who can't take care of themselves, it is not as effective as it could be. Yeah, sure, you can still get stuff done. You can still have good preaching. You can still have a good time at small group. You can even give money to missionaries. Sure. What about the people around you? God didn't say, I want you to go to the ends of the earth, then Judea and Samaria, then Jerusalem. No, reverse the order. Jerusalem, Judea and Samaria, and then to the ends of the earth. Start local. Love your community so that the community knows that church cares about me when no one else did. Maybe, just maybe, they learn about who Jesus is and they commit themselves to him. And even if they don't, planted the seed and you took care of them. So be mindful of that. Why? Because God is mindful of it. And if he thinks it's important, I better think it's important. So that is one of my credos when it comes to this book. If he mentions something with importance that isn't being done, that needs to get done, that tells me that's important to God and I should care about it. Which means that we as Christians should care about it. And everyone is equipped to do different things. I'm not a great organizer when it comes to stuff like that, so I'm never going to be in charge. But I can volunteer my time if I have it. I can give money if I have it. And if I can't do that, I can pray. I can want the best for them. I can mention them in my prayers to God saying, look, I can't do it because X, Y, Z. I don't have the money. I don't have the time. I'm not fit for the job. But you can still pray for the people who are. And there's so many people who look down on prayer as this act that does nothing. And that tells me they haven't read this book. Because prayer is one of the most powerful tools we have in our arsenal to bring God's glory into this world. And I say that as someone who's not the best at it and needs to work on it, but we can still do it. So figure out what it is. Does he want you actively involved? Does he want you to get someone else to do it? Does he just want you to pray? Then do it. Submit. Next, we'll go to chapter 25, verses 1 through 4. If there is a dispute between men and they come into court and the judges decide between them, acquitting the innocent and condemning the guilty, then if the guilty man deserves to be beaten, the judge shall cause him to lie down and be beaten in his presence with a number of stripes in proportion to his offense. 40 stripes may be given him, but not more, lest if one should go on to beat him with more stripes than these, your brother be degraded in your sight. You shall not muzzle an ox when it is treading out the grain. The first part here. Part of the justice of the land, specifically for Israel at this point in history. If someone has done a sin that doesn't lead to the sentence being murder, chances are this is one of the punishments that would be delivered. 40 strikes, 40 stripes against this person. Why? Make sure they didn't do it again. To make sure justice was delivered. And for people to know, were this man's back to be seen? He did something worthy of this offense. Ergo, he's probably not trustworthy. So maybe I shouldn't associate with him if he's trying to get me in on the next sweet deal or trying to convince me to give me his money. Give him my money or to lead me down a path to this other God. Now, eventually it got to the point in Jewish society, especially during the days of the Pharisees, where they were so afraid of accidentally going beyond 40 that they limited it to 39, which tells you a lot about the mindset of the Pharisees, completely and utterly missing the point of why this needed to be done. They focused on the number rather than on why the punishment needed to be meted out, which is so very in character for them. To a point where Paul brings it up. It's like, yeah, they flogged me, 39 times. I think it's 2 Corinthians when he said that. And I'm fairly certain it's brought up during the Gospels when Jesus is flogged before his crucifixion. Or maybe the number isn't mentioned. It's been a while since I've studied that part extensively, looking for the number. But that's what they would do because they were so afraid of offending God if they went beyond 40 rather than worrying about why God had this law in there for punishment for evil. So yeah, you slip up and do 41, you did wrong, you did against what God said, but it's not the end of the world. Quit focusing on the things that don't matter and focus on the things that do. God's righteousness is supposed to be displayed through that flogging. Rather than killing you like you deserve for your sin, God is allowing you to be struck 40 times with a whip or cat o' nine tails, whatever, just so you don't do it again, just so you learn your lesson. So you carry those scars with you forever and go, that's who I used to be. Let me never be that man again. But no, let's worry about the numbers. Oh, 39. If we go about that, it's the people who think they're clever and say, well, how many times should I forgive my brother? Well, 70 times 7. So what is that, 490? For the 491st time, I don't have to forgive him. Number one, why are you keeping count? Number two, how haughty are you that you can remember 490 and then 491 times when you screwed up or they screwed up and whatever. Now you don't have to do it anymore. It's pettiness that has nothing to do with the intent behind what is happening here. So just be smart. And speaking of being smart, don't abuse your animals. Verse 4, don't muzzle an ox when it's treading out the grain. Why? Because ox deserve to eat too. So while you're out trading the grain with them, let them eat. Like, they deserve that food. Now, Paul will take this in another way, rightfully so, to the work of being a pastor, being a leader in the church. Don't muzzle your pastor, sorry, I'm becoming a man. It's taken 35 years, pretty much. Don't muzzle your pastor by not paying him what he's worth, if you're able to do so. And if you're not, make that apparent. And if he's cool with it, go with it. Your leaders need to be paid for your wages, for their labor. This ox needs to be paid for its labor. So feed it. Don't be cruel by putting a muzzle on it. This animal deserves to be taken care of just as much as a human being does. The human being far more than the animal, but that doesn't mean we look down on them and despise them, thinking, yeah, they are lesser because they don't have the same soul you and I do. They don't have the same sapience that you and I do. That doesn't mean I get to then look down on them and say they're worse off than me and I can do whatever I want to them. No. Let it feed while it works. Let it eat while it works. God's children are not to be cruel to men and animal alike, and to nature as well. It's a very simple practice that we dilute into something it should never be. And yeah, I haven't met anyone out there who's perfect. Everyone who's always recycled everything that they did. Everyone who never threw away trash in the woods or put the wrong recycling, whatever, in the wrong bag. Look, we're all imperfect in how we've treated the earth, but we can be better. Just be more mindful. How do I actually do this correctly so I can love God's creation and love God by proxy because he's the one who made it? And just show devotion to him. Next up, verses 5 through 10. If brothers dwell together and one of them dies and has no son, the wife of the dead man shall not be married outside the family to a stranger. Her husband's brother shall go into her and take her as his wife and perform the duty of a husband's brother to her. And the first son whom she bears shall succeed to the name of his dead brother, that his name may not be blotted out of Israel. And if the man does not wish to take his brother's wife, then his brother's wife shall go up to the gate of the elders and say, my husband's brother refuses to perpetuate his brother's name in Israel. He will not perform the duty of a husband's brother to me. Then the elders of his city shall call him and speak to him. And if he persists, saying, I do not wish to take her, then his brother's wife shall go up to him in the presence of the elders and pull his sandal off his foot and spit in his face. And she shall answer and say, so shall it be done to the man who does not build up his brother's house. And the name of his house shall be called in Israel the house of him who had his sandal pulled off. This is what is known as the Levirate marriage. Has nothing to do with the tribe of Levi. It's I think it's Latin, lever, or lewer, since V's were W's pretty much in Latin. It means brother-in-law. The brother-in-law marriage is when, since they were allowed because they were hard of heart and because they don't live with the medical capabilities we have now, if a older brother died and a younger brother was able to take her as a wife, whether that be he had his own wife or didn't, and he refused to do so, he was in the wrong to bring evil and shame to his brother's name. Why? Because, genetically, it's not the same. Because, they come from the same family, the brothers, but they're not genetically the same. But the ideal here, the purpose behind this is for that brother to have descendants, even though, yes, genealogically it doesn't match, but for the purposes of inheritance, for the purposes of making sure everything flowed correctly in Israel, they were supposed to look out for each other. And then that brother was to marry the widow and take care of her, which guaranteed her a safe place to be in a society where women who weren't married at this age weren't cared for as well as they should have been, because people weren't doing their jobs, even though God commanded them to. This was a way in the law for that to be a guarantee. If that man had a brother, you get married to him, to that woman, so that she is taken care of. And then any child that comes from that, the first child becomes legally the dead brother's kid, so that his line continues. If it's a boy, I'm fairly certain. No, hold on. First son, yes, because male inheritance is the idea. But a man who refuses to do this shows that he does not love his brother, and he does not love his brother's spouse, and doesn't want to take care of her. Now, there could be a legitimate thing here, and that a man who is already married to a woman does not want to share his marriage bed with another woman and wants to solely be with his wife. That could be a way for this to be done, and the woman would not be taken care of, mind you, but everyone would know why the husband did it. She could still spit in his face and take his sandal away. But more than likely, what is happening here is that he refuses because he doesn't want any child that he has with her to not be legally his. He wants to only care about his lineage. And that evil was forbidden by God. And once again, like several things that happen here, this applies to the book of Ruth. Just like the finding food that has fallen down applies to the book of Ruth, so this does too. This is the law that sets up the end of the book of Ruth, where she becomes, sorry, spoilers for, over 1,500-year book. Well, a little less than that. 1,500 years at the time of Christ. So this is over 2,000. So over 3,000. Sorry, time. How does it work? Not I don't know. The point being, sets up for her to be able to marry Boaz in the law, which is why he has to go through the process. Hey, look, I'd love to be your husband, but legally speaking, there's another guy out there who has more of a claim than I have to go through him first, because Boaz was a righteous man who cared about God and cared about doing and submitting himself to his law. And thank God the man does say no. They don't go through the whole process of the, moving the sandal, if I remember correctly. Or maybe he does leave the sandal. It's been a while. It'll be a while until we get to Ruth. But when we do get there, we'll go over it. But that is how Boaz and Ruth are able to get married, is because he is, related to her former husband, cousins, second cousins, whatever it was. So it is by the law, his right is for that first son to be the son of the man who came before. So God put that in the law for the sake of others, for the sake of protecting the woman who more than likely would not have anyone looking after her, especially if she didn't have a child who was an adult at this stage in their lives. Next up, 11 through 12. When men fight with one another, and the wife of the one draws near to rescue her husband from the hand of him who is beating him, and puts out her hand and seizes him by the private parts, then you shall cut off her hand. Your eye shall have no pity. Now you're looking at this, this is just so harsh. This is cruel. How could God allow this? Well, given the times to live in, how could he not? All the woman wanted to do was to defend her husband. Yeah, that's fine. But what did she do in order to do it? Took away that man's ability to have a legacy, to have descendants of his own. And that is huge in this ancient culture. If he's not able to have children of his own, she should be thanking God that the only punishment that she gets is for her hand, which did the crime, to be taken away, because she has by proxy murdered those potential children from existence in the eyes of God, when she deserves far worse. But he narrows the punishment, doesn't give out the full extent of what she deserves for what she did. That's why he says, your eye shall have no pity, because she has prevented this man from carrying on his family line, which they took extremely seriously. You think I'm joking? Remember all those censuses they did? Remember all the times they said, son of, son of, son of? Because that mattered to the Jewish people a lot. It mattered especially to pretty much everyone. It matters to us in many regards, in different ways, sure, but we like to know where we come from. We like to know who our parents are so that we can figure out, okay, they came from here, they did that. Oh, I would have this genetic disorder because of this. But she's taken that away by her actions. And now she deserves to be punished. And this is intended as a deterrent for further actions to be done against her, even though it could be argued she might die or should die because of what she did. But God, in his mercy, says, no, take the hand instead and have no pity. 13 through 19. You shall not have in your bag two kinds of weights, a large and a small. You shall not have in your house two kinds of measures, a large and a small. A full and fair weight you shall have. Some of your translations may say just or righteous instead. A full and fair measure you shall have, that your days may be long in the land that the Lord your God is giving you. For all who do such things, all who act dishonestly, are an abomination to the Lord your God. Remember what Amalek did to you on the way as you came out of Egypt, how he attacked you on the way when you were faint and weary and cut off your tail, those who were lagging behind you, and he did not fear God. Therefore, when the Lord your God has given you rest from all your enemies around you in the land that the Lord your God is giving you for an inheritance to possess, you shall blot out the memory of Amalek from under heaven. You shall not forget. First part, God hates people not paying the wages they're supposed to. He despises and sees it as abominable for someone to use weights unfairly, to make a higher profit and steal from others who have earned their wages righteously while they are earning their wages unrighteously. This evil cannot exist in the land, and yet it will. Once again, when you're looking at the prophets, all you need to do is remember this law. These laws being made and go, oh, that's why they're so upset. Because these people are doing evil. This common sense stuff. Don't treat your customers unfairly. Love them well. Be honest in your dealings. Was exactly what the Israelites weren't doing when the prophets say, you don't care for those people. You are bringing evil into this land, and God is going to punish you as a result because your hearts are unrepentant. Because they care more about self and their greed than caring about the other person. And that, oh, imagine that. That act is abominable, an abomination to the Lord your God. See, it's not just about sex. God finds plenty of things abominable, but people like to harp on the other one because they're personally attacked by it. Or they know someone who is, and they feel like they need to defend those other people on their behalf. Instead of going, well, why does God think it's abominable? Why does God know it is? And what does that mean about me, that I should be the one that changes when he says something is an abomination? God's not the one who needs to change. He's perfect. He's immutable. He's him. Always has been, always will. So these things, if you kind of see a verse like that, more than likely, maybe I'm forgetting something, but more than likely, the answer is that's a moral law. That's something that will never change. Something that is an absolute in this world. This is antithetical to God, and therefore it is antithetical to anyone who wants to follow him. Be righteous in how you deal with people. Be honest in how you deal with people. Do not take advantage of them. If something is worth $100, don't take $125 from them. Just be honest with them. Love them well. And then we get to Amalek here. If you recall, back in our Exodus days, they attacked Israel on their way out of Egypt because the Amalekites were robbers, thieves, rapists, scourgers of the land, barbarians who took out people and never sowed, but always reaped the benefits of anyone they attacked. They would attack merchants along the way. They would attack armies who came their way because they were looking out for self. Their culture was based around murdering and bullying and taking what wasn't theirs to have just so they could have, just so they could own, just so they could profit off of the lives and misery of other people. So when they attacked Israel, they were doing that exact same thing, going after the weakest members of their party those who were lagging behind you, because they didn't fear God and they never would. So this is exactly why God puts it in the law, that they are to exterminate this people group from the land. Now, Joshua and I and some guests as well are about to be going into a new podcast. Imagine I'm doing something else. This is unprecedented. We're calling it Turning the Page on Divine, what did we decide on? It was Divine Violence. We decided that instead of Divine Genocide. And we're going through a book called Showed Them No Mercy, 4 Views on God and Canaanite Genocide. So the idea being, like, what are the different views on it? What are we supposed to think? And I am going to be taking the position that God was righteous to call for the genocide, the deaths of the entire culture and people of the Canaanites. And I'm also going to say the exact same thing about Amalek right here. Why? Because their culture was based on evil. These aren't philosophers. These aren't people just living out in the world. These are people who, by the very nature of who they were, decided we are raiders and barbarians, and we will kill anyone who comes across us because we want what they have, and we're not willing to work for it. We're not willing to pay for it. We're not willing to be stable members of any society around us. And you know what you do with people like that? You don't let them be. You remove them from society as permanently as possible because they have proven they cannot and will never fear God. That is harsh to say. I'm not going to argue against that. But I'm going to argue it is biblical. I'm going to argue that God is in the right to do what he did. Well, later on, he has King Saul attempt to do it. Saul doesn't follow through with it, and that's one of the reasons why Saul doesn't stay king. And it won't be until the time of King Hezekiah, where I think it's when we go to First Chronicles, when it's some of the Simeonites who finally destroy for good the Amalekites, unless you are of the belief, and I kind of sort of am, that Haman in Esther, the Agagite, aka probably someone who is a descendant of King Agag, who Saul spared, who was actively trying to murder the Jews and commit an act of genocide against them, then he dies and it's finally fulfilled, if that is true, which I flip-flop on. This is a just law because of who they're dealing with and what they're about. These are not people you can reason with. These are not people that say, well, you just need to turn the other cheek. No, that is antithetical to turn the other cheek, by the way, which isn't just be passive and always just let people bully you. That is a completely separate thing that when we do get to Matthew after this, I will be talking about. This is, don't let this evil remain in the land, because if you do, you are allowing it to happen, and you might as well be doing it yourselves. That is why Samuel and God get so upset with Saul in 1 Samuel 15 for not killing all the Amalekites and all their livestock and everything God told them to commit to destruction. Because by allowing anyone to survive, Saul was saying, I'm okay with what they're doing. It's not bothering me. It's not hurting me, but it's hurting other people. We can't be like that when it comes to sin and evil in this world. That is why we remove and have laws for people who commit murder to be put to death. Not because there's some contradiction there, but because they have proven they cannot remain in society. Because if they're allowed to remain in society, they will continue doing what they're doing. And I pray for them that are on death row, that they do actually have a legitimate moment of conversion. That does not then stop their execution in my mind, but it does help them find who God is, so that I know they'll be with him. And you can argue against me all day long. I'm not budging from that. Because I see verses like these and I see God as who he is. And knowing he cannot abide sin, especially unrepentant sin that does not fear him. Unrepentant people who do not fear him. We are to fear God well and fear God correctly. And allowing evil like this to remain in our midst is abominable. Much in the same way that allowing someone who has proven that their sexual conduct is unbecoming of a man of God and allowing them to remain a pastor, allowing them to remain a youth pastor or a small group leader or what have you. Same applies to women too. and not doing anything about them, not getting them out of the church and saying, no, you are not welcome here because you are unrepentant and you've done evil and you will probably do it again. That is why God finds these things abominable. Because if we allow that to happen, are promoting evil in the world. We are never to do such a thing. Evil must be destroyed, not only in our own life, but in the lives of those around us. We have a zero tolerance policy for it because we do not accept it and we do not condone it. Because doing either one of those things means we are promoting evil. And being passive about it is promoting evil. Not thinking about it is promoting evil. We are never to do that. We bring evil into this world, even if we are not the ones committing it, because we know someone has done wrong and we're doing nothing to stop them. God cannot abide that, and neither should we. So Amalek needs to be destroyed for what they've done. And if along the road, maybe there was a Amalekite out there who realized the evil of their ways and went to God before him and fell down on his knees and said, God, forgive me for what I've done. I hope that there was, but I see no textual basis for it. I want to be wrong, but I see no textual basis for it. So I'm not going to invent some fairy tale story just to make me feel better, because that's a terrible way to look at the word of God. Love him well and listen to what he says. Evil cannot be in the life of a Christian, and it can never be a part of the church. We'll go from there to chapter 26, verses 1 through 4. When you come into the land that the Lord your God is giving you for an inheritance and have taken possession of it and live in it, you shall take some of the first of all the fruit of the ground, which you harvest from your land that the Lord your God is giving you, and you shall put it in a basket, and you shall go to the place that the Lord your God will choose to make his name to dwell there. And you shall go to the priest who is in office at that time and say to him, I declare today to the Lord your God that I have come into the land that the Lord swore to our fathers to give us. Then the priest shall take the basket from your hand and set it down before the altar of the Lord your God. I will go to 5 through 11 too. And you shall make a response before the Lord your God. A wandering Aramaean was my father, and he went down into Egypt and sojourned there, few in number, and there he became a nation great, mighty, and populous. And the Egyptians treated us harshly and humiliated us and laid on us hard labor. Then we cried to the Lord, the God of our fathers, and the Lord heard our voice and saw our affliction, our toil, and our oppression. And the Lord brought us out of Egypt with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm, with great deeds of terror, with signs and wonders. And he brought us into this place and gave us this land, a land flowing with milk and honey. And behold, now I bring the first of the fruit of the ground, which you, O Lord, have given me. And you shall set it down before the Lord your God, and worship before the Lord your God. And you shall rejoice in all the good that the Lord your God has given to you and to your house, you and the Levite and the sojourner who is among you. If Israel was doing what they were supposed to do, they would be bringing out the first fruits of their labor to God, because it meant they could afford to do so, because God had blessed them in such an abundance that giving this up was a pittance compared to their actual yield of their crops. So they were to bring it to the temple, all of them, and give it to the Levites who were supposed to be doing their jobs and bringing the people to sacrifice correctly and bringing the people to worship God correctly. And they were supposed to commune with one another and enjoy the bounty, because God had given it to them for their sake, especially to the Levites who had no way of earning that for themselves other than doing their jobs and trusting God. And as this was happening, we have one of the earliest signs of what's essentially a creed of the Jewish people, where they were supposed to recount their history and say, look, God, here's this crazy story. This wandering Aramaean came from the other side of the Fertile Crescent all the way to the land of Canaan, and you said that you were going to make him into something mighty. You brought his people down to Egypt, and we were few in number, but you made us a populous, great, mighty nation. And even though the Egyptians treated us terribly, we cried out to you, and you brought us out of Egypt and into a land flowing with milk and honey. Now, because you have done those things, I give these things up to you, Lord, as recognition of what you have done to our forefathers and to me, so that I can praise your name and enjoy what God has given me alongside the Levite and a sojourner in the land, so we can all say, praise God for what he has done. That's why this chapter exists. Yeah, it's a shorter one in the midst of everything, but it's supposed to be a reminder. When this is being written down, depending on how you date the exile, whether it's like the 1400s or the 1200s, or some people would even say the 1100s BC, regardless, doesn't matter. When this is being written down before the Israelites entered the land, they're supposed to look back at this verse and say, that's kind of a crazy story. Hey, but it's what got me here. I believe in crazy things to the minds of men. And yet the wisdom of God is so above that. It's only God who can make some nobody from become his man through and through and create a mighty nation out of him, even though he was in his 70s at the beginning, if I remember correctly, barren, his wife barren, having no children of their own, and yet God promising that to him. And then suddenly, not only do they have a child, but that child has children, that the children of that child has children, and then it continues from there and there and there, and suddenly there's 12 and one girl, and then suddenly there's 12 tribes of Israel, and suddenly they're all over the place in Egypt, and even when they're in the midst of slavery, they come into the land of Canaan, and now they're more populous than before. That is insane, except for the part where it's true. And because this is true, you presenting this offering to me right now, you Jewish man, say these things. And remember, if I did that for them, what else will I do for you, because you are being faithful to me? The promises I have made are yours because you have submitted to my authority. And you will be blessed as a result of it. When you boil it down, it's just so simple. And the Jewish people over their history couldn't do this. They couldn't just trust God and say, you brought us out of Egypt. You made us into a mighty nation. You've given this food, O Lord. Therefore, I will always bring it to you because I trust you to continue to do it next year and the year after that. And instead, they deny him. They seek after other gods. So God allows famine. God allows death and occupations and oppression and all these terrible things to happen, including exile, all because his people didn't do these very simple things. But we can do better. If we remember these same things and act like the Jewish people of old did, we're going to have the exact same thing happen to us, just because of different reasons, because we knew more than they do, or we know more than they do, and we should know more than they do. We have far more access to Scripture than they did at this time in history. Whether we right now are Gentile or Jewish Christian, doesn't matter. We know more, therefore our responsibility is that much bigger. The price of us not doing what we're supposed to do is that much larger. So let us remember this. Where did we come from? I don't know how far back it goes in my family line of the first one to say yes to God. But I know, looking back through some of the genealogy records my mother has done, that this person was faithful, that this person did their job. As a result of them doing their job, they did it for their children did it for their children, to the point where my grandparents come along on both sides, and imperfect people made imperfect children who made their decision with God, and they raised an imperfect child, and that imperfect child said yes to God. Even if you're the first person in your family to come to faith, you've started something amazing. Remember that. Where did we start from? As we go in front of God and say, Lord, this is what I have to offer you. Yeah, we don't give up of our yield. I'm not a farmer. I'm never going to be a farmer. But I can give my time. I can give my studying. I can give my money, whatever it is, straight to him. And remember, I'm here as a result of all this, Lord. Let me continue to be a part of it and praise your name alone. So just think about that. Remember where you came from and what God has done for you. Continue to do so in this world so that others can go and do the same as they come to faith, or as they come to the realization that even though they've come to faith, they haven't thought about this. A lot of blessings will come that way. Yeah, I'm not going to say that you're going to get a car or a nice house or your own jet plane or whatever, but God will bless his own on his time and in accordance to his will. You just have to be the ones who trust in him. We'll finish off today by reading verses 12 through 19. When you finish paying all the tithe of your produce in the third year, which is the year of tithing, giving it to the Levite, the sojourner, the fatherless, and the widow, so that they may eat within your towns and be filled, Then you shall say before the Lord your God, I have removed the sacred portion out of my house, and moreover, I have given it to the Levite, the sojourner, the fatherless, and the widow, according to all your commandment, that you have commanded me. I have not transgressed any of your commandments, nor have I forgotten them. I have not eaten of the tithe while I was mourning, or removed any of it while I was unclean, or offered any of it to the dead. I have obeyed the voice of the Lord my God. I have done according to all that you have commanded me. Look down from your holy habitation from heaven and bless your people Israel on the ground that you have given us, as you swore to our fathers, a land flowing with milk and honey. This day the Lord your God commands you to do these statutes and rules. You should therefore be careful to do them with all your heart and with all your soul. You have declared the day that the Lord is your God, and that you will walk in his ways and keep his statutes and his commandments and his rules, and will obey his voice. And the Lord has declared today that you are a people for his treasured possession, as he has promised you, and that you are to keep all his commandments, and that he will set you in praise and in fame and in honor high above all nations that he has made, and that you shall be a people holy to the Lord your God, as he promised. And as the Jewish people were giving these things up to God, they were also supposed to say these things. I have turned away from my sin. Look down, Lord, and bless me, for I have done what I'm supposed to do. I did it out of a heart that was seeking after you, not a heart that was seeking for self-gain or pride or my own desires, but for you alone I have done this. And in light of all of this, God looks at the people as he's pretty much going to be ending parts of delivering the law. There are going to be some things, minor things, well, not minor things, minor as in not as built up as the rest of these, I should say, that God will introduce in other chapters of Deuteronomy. This is near the end of all that. This is him saying, look, all these things, everything we went through in the past, 4, 5-ish books, there are some laws brought up in Genesis that apply to the Israelites too. All those things. You said you would do these things. You went up before literally God and everybody and said, I will commit to this. I will follow these laws. I will sacrifice this way. I will love my neighbor as myself. I will love the Lord my God with all my heart, all my mind, and all my soul. So just saying, by the way, remember that part, because it's going to be very apparent in history of the Israelites that they were supposed to do these things. And sometimes they did. But sometimes when they said these things, they said them out of obligation rather than fear, rather than love of God. And he is going to put those words in his mind, and he's going to throw them right back at them. Why? Because they didn't mean them, and he deserves better. So when he does come to judge, they have no one to blame but themselves. And we need to be careful about that too. How many times have we said, Lord, I did this in your name. I did that in your name. Oh, God, give me the strength to do this. And if you do this, then I'll do that. And he delivers. And we say, I wasn't serious about that. Or we forget about it, quotation marks, and decide to focus on something else. But there's going to come a time, hopefully in this life while we still have time to change, where God's going to throw that right back in our face and said, you promised me this. Let your word be your word, my child. Why haven't you done it? We're not going to be the ones in the right when he throws that back in our face, because we're the ones who committed sin against him. So we need to be mindful of these things. What have I promised him that I haven't done? Is there a reason why I haven't been able to do it? Is it because I'm not capable of doing it? Did I make an oath that I shouldn't have made? Did I decide that my importance was better than God's, so I put it on the back burner? We need to think about these things, and then we need to repent when we've done wrong. And we need to make sure if we say anything to him, we do it because we love him and because we love ourselves. It's okay to love yourself. Did you know that? It's when we then turn that love of self into idol worship that it becomes an issue. When I see myself as more important than God and I place myself on that pedestal a little higher than him, that it becomes an issue. We are commanded to love others. We're commanded to love ourselves well. Loving ourselves well means we submit to him. Our word is our word, and we commit to what we're supposed to do. So in light of all that, just remember, why do we do what we do? What are we supposed to do? Submit to God's moral law and all of his judgments in regard to that. Thank you all for your time today. Please, if you get a chance, leave a 5-star review on your podcasting platform of choice to help us with the ratings there, to help find more people who might be interested in this show. Please feel free as well to share the show with friends, family members, cousins. I'm told love, doing stuff like this. I have it on good authority from the Whole Church podcast from TJ himself that cousins love it. If you're interested in my own fiction writing, you can find my works at starvingwritersguild.com or on Amazon by searching for the name MC Ashley. If you're all interested in some further solid studies into the Bible and its teachings, then check out the other members of the Anazal Ministries Podcasting Network. You can find me specifically on Systematic Ecology, Why I Don't Like, Friday Night Frights, on Some Joyful Noises. You can contact me at letnothingmoviepodcast@gmail.com. I'd like to extend a special thank you to Joshua Knoll for the editing that he does and for the music he has to the podcast. And with all that in mind, God bless you in accordance to his will, not mine. And allow me one more time to remind you, let nothing move you.